The massive control room stretched across 3 levels, filled with the soft blue glow of countless data screens. Archive Director Vexal walked slowly between the workstations, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. Each screen showed the same message. Records deleted successfully. Another sector cleared. Director called out his assistant from across the room. The Andromeda colonies are now completely clean. Vexal's scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he felt satisfied. 22 years of careful work had brought them to this moment. Soon, every trace of the humans would be gone from official history. He stopped at a large holographic display that showed the galaxy in 3 dimensions. Red dots marked completed sectors, while yellow ones showed work in progress. A few. Yellow dots remained. "How many more sectors?" he asked. 17, sir. The outer rim territories are taking longer because their systems are older and more scattered. Vexal nodded. The humans had spread far during their brief time in Galactic society. They had been traders, soldiers, diplomats, and settlers. They had married into other species and shared their culture freely. That was exactly why they had to be erased. They were too dangerous, he muttered to himself, remembering the reports from the war councils. Humans fought differently than other species. They were unpredictable, emotional, and refused to surrender, even when facing impossible odds. They inspired others to fight harder, to question authority, to dream of impossible things. The Galactic Confederation worked best when everyone followed the rules. When peace was maintained through order and predictability, humans brought chaos. Wherever they went, on his desk sat a small crystal containing the last known recording of Earth. He had watched it once, years ago. The blue and green planet spinning slowly in space, covered in swirling white clouds, looked peaceful, but Vexal knew better. That world had produced the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. Tomorrow, even this crystal would be destroyed, far away, on a tiny trading station that orbited a dying star. Gina finished her shift at the cargo bay and walked home. Through narrow corridors filled with the smell of cooking food and engine oil, Ursa's small apartment was nothing special, but it held secrets that could destroy her life. Behind a false wall, she kept 3 old books written in strange symbols that most people in the galaxy had forgotten how to read. The books belonged to her grandfather, who had died when she was very young. He had made her promise to keep them safe, though she never understood why they were so important. The books contained stories about a blue world where people lived under an open sky. They told of rain that fell from clouds, of vast oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, and of creatures that flew through the air on feathered wings. To Gina, these seemed like fantasy stories, but her grandfather had always insisted they were real. "Never forget where you come from," he had whispered to her with his last breath. "Never forget who you are." Gina pulled out one of the books and ran her fingers over the worn cover. She could not read the symbols, but she knew some of the stories by heart. Her grandfather had told them to her many times when she was small. Meanwhile, on a cargo ship 3 sectors away, Commander Tejo stood in his small kitchen preparing dinner for his crew. The ship was old and cramped, but it was home to 15. People from 6 different species. They were like family to him. He stirred a pot of stew that filled the air with rich, complex smells. The recipe came from his mother, written on a piece of paper that was yellow with age. The symbols looked similar to those in Gina's books, though neither of them knew about the other. "Smells wonderful, Commander," said his engineer, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. "What do you call this dish?" Tejo smiled. "Mother called it kimchi jjigae. It's an old family recipe." "From which world?" The smile faded from Tejo's face. "I don't remember," he lied. "My mother died when I was young." The truth was that his mother had made him promise never to speak about their origins. She had changed their family name and destroyed all records of their past. But she had kept her recipes, teaching them to her son before she died. "Food is memory," she had told him. "Long as we keep cooking these dishes, we keep our people alive." Now Tejo fed his crew the same food his ancestors had eaten on a world that officially no longer existed. None of them knew they were tasting history. Back in the control room, Vextel watched the final sectors turn from yellow to red. His assistant approached with a datapad. Director, we've found something unusual. Many cultural elements seem to have no clear origin point. Music, food, art, even some languages appear to have developed from nowhere. Vextel waved dismissively. Unimportant. Our job is to remove official records, not to trace every cultural influence. But as he looked at the now completely red galaxy map, a small doubt crept into his mind. Had they truly erased the humans, or had they simply made them invisible? 5 years had passed since the Great Erasure, but strange things kept happening across the galaxy that no one could explain. Little Subin sat in her classroom on Centauri Prime, daydreaming while her teacher talked about ancient galactic history. Without thinking, she began to hum a soft melody under her breath. The tune seemed to come from somewhere deep in her memory, though she could not remember learning it. Sven, her teacher called sharply. Pay attention. The other children giggled, but Suvin felt embarrassed. She had been humming again without realizing it. This happened often, and she never knew why. After school, she walked home through the busy streets of New Seoul. The city was full of tall buildings and flying cars, but Subin always felt like something was missing. She could not say what it was, just that the world felt incomplete somehow, at home. She found her grandmother sitting in her favorite chair, looking out the window at the artificial sunset created by the city's light projectors. Grandmother, Subin said, sitting beside her, I was humming that song again today. The one that makes me feel safe. Where did you teach it to me? Her grandmother's old face grew troubled. She reached out with a shaking hand to touch Subin's cheek. I don't know, little one, she whispered. Sometimes songs just live in our hearts and we don't remember how they got there. But late that night, when she thought Subin was asleep, the old woman cried quietly. She remembered exactly where the lullaby came from, though speaking about it could destroy them both. Across the galaxy on the mining world of Kepler Station, the day shift was ending at the largest spaceport in the sector. Dockworker Hyunsu wiped the sweat from his face and headed to his favorite tavern for his usual drink. The tavern was called the Stellar Rest, and it was always crowded with workers from dozens of different worlds. The owner, a friendly creature with green skin and tentacles for arms, waved at Hyunsu from behind the bar. The usual? The owner asked. Yes, please. 1 earth brew, extra strong. The owner prepared the drink, a dark liquid that tasted bitter and energizing at the same time. It was the most popular drink in the tavern, though nobody could explain why it was called Earth Brew when no world called Earth existed in any database. Hyunsu sat at his usual table with 3 other dock workers. They always ordered the same drinks, Earth Brew, Solside Special, and Terra Mix. The names meant nothing to them, but the drinks tasted like home somehow. Strange names for drinks, said one of his friends, a tall alien with silver skin. I asked the owner once where they came from. What did he say? Hyunsu asked. He didn't know. Said his father taught him the recipes and his grandfather taught his father. The recipes are very old, but nobody remembers who created them. They drank in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The drinks always made them feel peaceful, as if they were connected to something larger than themselves. On the other side of the station, a small apartment filled with old books and star charts, Captain Minho sat with 5 other veterans. From the Void Wars, they met like this once a month, always in secret, always careful not to be overheard. Tell us about the Battle of Rigel 7 again, asked one of the younger veterans. Minho's scarred face grew serious. We were losing badly. 3 ships destroyed, 2 more badly damaged. The enemy had us surrounded and our conventional tactics weren't working. Then what happened? They appeared. Fighters that moved like nothing we had ever seen. They flew. Patterns that should have been impossible. Attacked from angles that made no sense. But it worked. Who were they? Minho looked around the room carefully before speaking. Our most effective allies. But they don't exist in any official records. Their names were carved on our memorial walls, but now those spaces are blank. The others nodded grimly. They all had similar stories. Soldiers who fought alongside them with incredible courage and skill, using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. But when they tried to find these soldiers in official databases, there was nothing. Remember, one of them, said another veteran quietly. She taught me a fighting technique that saved my life dozens of times. She said it came from something called Taekwondo, whatever that means. And that song they used to sing after battles added another. It made everyone feel brave, even when things looked hopeless. They sat in silence, remembering comrades who had officially never existed. But the techniques they had learned, the courage they had gained, the bonds they had formed, these things were real, even if the records had been erased. Back in her classroom the next day, Suben raised her hand during history lesson. "Teacher, why are there gaps in the history books? Like we learn about the Alliance Wars. And then suddenly there's a period where nothing important happened for 50 years? But that doesn't make sense." Her teacher looked uncomfortable. "Sometimes records are lost, Subin. It's just how history works." But Subin was not satisfied. She had noticed the gaps everywhere. In art museums, whole styles of painting seemed to appear from nowhere. In music libraries, entire genres had no clear origin. Even in the food court, some of the most popular dishes were listed as traditional recipe, origin unknown. Something was missing from their world, and the young generation was beginning to notice. Dr. Soyoung sat in her small office at the University of Proxima, surrounded by stacks of research papers and glowing data screens that she had been studying. Cultural evolution patterns for 15 years, but lately, something was bothering her deeply. She pulled up a chart showing the development of galactic standard philosophy over the past century. According to the records, 3 major philosophical movements had appeared suddenly around 40 years ago, with no clear predecessors or founding documents. They just existed one day, as if someone had planted them in the collective consciousness of billions of beings. "This makes no sense," she muttered, rubbing her tired eyes. Her assistant, a young Altarian with purple skin and large eyes, looked up from his desk. "What's wrong, doctor? Look at this," Soyoung said, pointing to her screen. The concept of individual rights, the idea of democratic representation, the principle of equal justice under law. All of these ideas appeared in our society at roughly the same time, but there's no record of who developed them or where they came from. The assistant studied the data. Maybe they evolved naturally from older ideas. That's what I thought too, but I've traced back centuries of philosophical development. These concepts have no roots in any known galactic culture. They're completely foreign to how most species think, yet somehow they became the foundation of our entire civilization. Soyoung had spent months documenting similar mysteries. Art forms that appeared without masters to teach them. Musical styles with no cultural origins. Even languages showed strange patterns, with loan words from a source that simply did not exist in any database. That evening, she sent carefully worded messages to other researchers across the galaxy. She had to be careful asking too many. Questions about historical inconsistencies could attract unwanted attention from the authorities. Dr. Hajin from the Vega Institute of Linguistics was the first to respond. He had noticed the same strange patterns in trade languages. Dr. Kyung-mi, art historian from the Orion Cultural Center, had documented over 300 artistic techniques that seemed to have no origin point. Within weeks, a small network of scholars had formed. They communicated through encrypted channels and met in secret locations. Each person brought more evidence of the great mystery that seemed to touch every aspect of galactic society. The breakthrough came when Ji-woon finally decided to trust them. He had been watching their group for months, debating whether it was safe to reveal himself. For 30 years, he had lived with falsified genetic records and a carefully constructed false identity. He worked as a maintenance engineer on a space station, keeping his head down and never drawing attention to himself. But seeing these people search desperately for answers he could provide, he knew he had to take the risk. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of New Titan City. 7 researchers sat around a small table, their faces lit by the glow of portable data screens. "I have something to tell you all," Ji-woon said quietly. "But once I say it, there's no going back for any of us." Dr. Soyoung leaned forward. "We're already committed to finding the truth." Ji-woon took a deep breath. "I'm human. My real name is Park Ji-woon, and I was born on Earth 53 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening, and everyone began talking at once. Impossible, said Dr. Hajin. Humans are extinct. No, said Dr. So-young slowly. Humans never existed according to official records. But if Ji-woon is telling the truth, I can prove it, Gi-woon said. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a small scar on his arm. This is from a childhood vaccination that only existed on Earth. I can also show you genetic markers that don't appear in any known species database. Over the next several hours, Gi-woon told them everything. How his people had been systematically erased from history. How survivors had gone into hiding, changing their identities, and living in secret. The culture and knowledge of Earth had become so deeply embedded in galactic society that removing it completely was impossible. You want to know where those philosophical concepts came from? Ji-woon asked. They're based on human governmental theories developed over thousands of years on Earth. Democracy, individual rights, equal justice. These were human ideas that we shared freely with other species. Sujin, a former diplomatic translator who had joined their group, nodded slowly. That explained so much. I always wondered why the universal greeting gesture involved placing one hand over the heart. It never made sense for most species. It's based on a human custom, Ji-woon confirmed. A way of showing peaceful intentions and respect. As their network grew over the following months, they began documenting everything systematically. Every cultural remnant, every person with partial human ancestry, every technique or tradition that showed human influence. The list was staggering. Half the military academies in the galaxy taught strategic concepts developed by human generals. Most popular music used scales and rhythms that originated on Earth. Even the standard calendar system was based on Earth's orbital patterns. They found humans hiding in every sector, living under false identities. Some had children with other species, creating a vast population of mixed heritage that the authorities had never accounted for. We're not just documenting a lost civilization, Dr. So-young realized during one of their meetings. We're documenting the foundation of current galactic civilization. Humans didn't just contribute to our society, they helped create it. The Memory Keepers, as they now called themselves, faced a terrible choice. They could continue their research in secret, or they could risk everything to bring the truth to light. The decision was made for them. When the war began, the alarm screamed through the command center of Starbase Omega as Admiral Kexvar stared. At the tactical display in disbelief, 3 red markers showed where entire colonies had been just hours before. Now there was nothing but empty space and debris. Report, he commanded, his voice tight with controlled panic. The Devourer fleet appeared without warning from dark space. His tactical officer replied, her hands shaking as she worked the controls. They destroyed Colony Alpha 7 in 12 minutes. Beta Station lasted only 8 minutes. Colony Gamma Prime had no time to even send a distress signal. Kexvar had been fighting wars for 40 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The enemy ships moved in patterns that made no sense, attacked from impossible angles, and seemed to know exactly what the Confederation forces would do before they did it. Sir, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the Outer Rim. The Devourer fleet is heading toward the core worlds. At their current speed, they'll reach Proxima Colony in 6 hours. Deploy the 5th Fleet to intercept, Kexvar ordered. Battle formation. What followed was a disaster. The 5th Fleet's most experienced commanders used every tactic in the military handbook. But the Devourers seemed to anticipate every move. Ships that should have been safely positioned found themselves surrounded. Attack patterns that had worked for decades failed completely. Within 2 hours, the 5th Fleet was destroyed. Sir, his communications officer called out Admiral Chen's flagship is gone. We've lost contact with the entire fleet. Kexvar felt something he had never experienced before, complete helplessness. In 40 years of military service, he had always found a way to win. Now he was facing an enemy that fought unlike anything in their databases. Sir, I'm detecting some fragmentary references in our archived war records, the tactical officer reported. There are mentions of similar tactics being used by an enemy force about 30 years ago. Show me, Kexvar demanded. The holographic display showed partial files, many of them corrupted or incomplete. But what he could see made his blood run cold. The enemy tactics were identical to what they were facing now. What happened in those battles? How did we win? The tactical officer worked frantically at her console. Sir, most of the strategic data has been deleted. I can see references to effective counter-tactics, but the actual details are gone. It's like someone removed all the important information. Develop these counter-tactics. The files just say Allied Force Delta, but there's no record of any unit by that name in our databases. As the hours passed and more reports came in of devastating defeats, HFY realized they were facing extinction. The Devourers were not just winning, they were completely destroying every force sent against them. In desperation, he made a decision that went against all military protocol. Contact all unofficial sources, he ordered. Veterans, retired officers, anyone who might have information about these tactics. I don't care if they're not in the official database. His staff looked shocked. Contacting unofficial sources could end his career, but HFY no longer cared about regulations. He cared about survival. Within hours, his flagship received a transmission from an old cargo ship requesting permission to dock. The ship's captain identified himself as Minho, a veteran of the Void Wars. Admiral Minho said as he entered, "The command center with 5 other grizzled veterans, we've fought these things before." HFY studied the old soldiers. They looked ordinary enough, but something in their eyes suggested they had seen things that most people could not imagine. The files say you fought similar tactics, but they don't say how you won. Minho exchanged glances with his companions. That's because the people who taught us how to win have been erased from your records. What do you mean? Our most effective allies, Admiral? The ones who develop the tactics that can beat these creatures? They're not in your databases because someone decided they never existed. Before HFY could respond, his communications officer interrupted. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Dr. So Young at the University of Proxima. She says she has information that could help us. An hour later, the command center was filled with people who officially did not exist. Dr. So Young and her team of researchers sat alongside Minho's veterans, while a maintenance engineer named Ji Woon stood at the center of the room. Ji Woon said quietly, "I'm going to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about galactic history." "I'm listening. My name is Park Ji Woon, and I'm human. My people were systematically erased from official records 25 years ago, but we never left. We've been here all along, hiding in plain sight." The room fell silent. Then, everyone began talking at once. "Impossible," said the tactical officer. "Humans are extinct." "No," said Dr. So Young firmly. "According to our research, humans never existed in official records. But they're the missing piece that explains everything." Gi Woon stepped forward. "Admiral, the tactics that can defeat the Devourers were developed by human strategists. The countermeasures your files reference were created by human engineers. The fighting techniques that saved your veterans' lives came from human martial arts. We're still here," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "We never left, and we remember how to fight these things." The truth spread through the fleet faster than official communications could travel. More humans emerged from hiding and shared their knowledge. The impossible became reality. The species that had been erased from history was about to save the galaxy. The message spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On communication networks, in cantinas, through encrypted channels and open broadcasts, the same words were repeated over and over. They're real. The humans are real. They never left us. Within days of Admiral HFY's victory over the Devourer, fleet using human tactics, everything changed. The careful silence that had protected hidden humans for decades was finally broken on the agricultural world of Harmony. Governor Dayun stood before the Planetary Council with tears in her eyes. For 15 years, she had led her world to prosperity, but she had never told anyone her secret. "My fellow citizens," she said, her voice shaking, "I have something to confess. My grandfather was human, and I have been hiding this truth my entire life." The council chamber erupted in shocked voices, but Dayun continued. The farming techniques that made our world famous, the crop rotation methods that feed half this sector, the soil management that turned our deserts into gardens, all of this came from my grandfather's knowledge. He was one of the first human. Colonists and I kept his methods alive. Counselor Veltar, a tall alien with silver skin, stood up slowly. Governor, are you saying that our agricultural success is based on human science? Yes, Dayun replied firmly. Half our crop yields come from human agricultural knowledge that I preserved in secret, and I'm not the only one. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On New Proxima, the head chef of the most famous restaurant revealed that his signature dishes were based on recipes his human grandmother had taught him. On Kepler Station, the chief engineer admitted that the innovative ship designs that made their shipyard famous came from human engineering principles his father had preserved. Little Subin, now 18 years old, had become something she never expected, a leader. The shy girl who once hummed mysterious songs in class now stood before crowds of thousands, speaking about the truth that had been hidden from them. We grew up feeling like something was missing, she told a gathering on Centauri Prime. Had songs with no origins, foods with no history, ideas that seemed to come from nowhere. Now we know why. Half of our culture was stolen from us. The crowds cheered, but Subin's voice grew serious. They tried to erase our ancestors from history, but they forgot something important. You can delete files, but you cannot delete love. You can remove names from databases, but you cannot remove the bonds between people. The humans who were supposedly erased never left us. They're our grandparents, our teachers, our friends. They're part of us. On distant worlds, in hidden archives and secret meetings, more humans emerged from the shadows. Giwun was no longer alone. There were thousands of them, scattered across the galaxy, living under false names and fabricated histories. Dr. Soyoung's Memory Keepers Network had grown into a movement that spanned hundreds of worlds. They documented everything, every preserved recipe, every hidden photograph, every story passed down through generations. The evidence was overwhelming, but not everyone was happy about the revelations in the crystal towers of the Galactic Confederation headquarters. Director Vextel faced the most humiliating moment of his long career. The Zephyrian Council had called an emergency session, and he stood before them knowing his life's work was in ruins. Council Leader Prime, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Confederation, spoke with barely controlled fury. Director Vextel, explain to this council how your erasure project has brought us to the edge of destruction. Vextel's clawed hands trembled as he replied. The erasure was meant to prevent conflict, Council Leader. Humans were unpredictable, aggressive. We believed removing them from history would ensure galactic peace. Instead, Prime continued coldly, you nearly destroyed us all. When the Devourer fleet attacked, our forces were helpless because you had deleted the knowledge. We needed to fight them. Human tactics saved our fleets. Human strategies defeated our enemies. Human philosophy guides our laws, and human children live in our homes. Around the council chamber, representatives from hundreds of worlds nodded in agreement. Many of them had discovered human ancestry in their own families. The vote is before us, Prime announced. Should humanity be restored to all official records, and should reparations be made for this historical injustice? The vote was swift and unanimous. Not a single council member opposed the motion. Across the galaxy, archivists began the massive task of restoration. In databases and libraries, museums and schools, the name Earth was quietly typed back into records where it belonged. The blue and green planet that had been erased from star charts reappeared in its proper place, but the most meaningful changes happened in small moments. Gina finally pulled her grandfather's journals from their hiding place and donated them to the new Museum of Human Heritage. Teho taught his crew the real names of the dishes he had been serving them for years. Captain Minho and his veterans were honored as heroes, their human comrades finally recognized in official memorials. Young Suben stood in the restored Earth Memorial Garden on New Sol, reading the inscription that had been carved in stone, too. The humans of Earth never forgotten, always home. Your echo became our voice, and now it rings through the stars forever." She hummed the lullaby her grandmother had taught her, the same melody that countless other children were learning across the galaxy. But now they knew where it came from, and why it made them feel safe. The echo had indeed become a roar, and the sound of Earth would never be silenced again.